Hi everyone, my name is JT Pod and today we're making another airport update. This time we'll be doing a random model airport day at long last, and this is for Raleigh Durham International Airport. And this is the sixth random model airport day. This is for April of 2024. So, yes, I've gotten lots of requests to do Raleigh Durham. It's been one of the most requested airports, so a lot of you guys are excited to see this airport finally coming to my YouTube channel just for this one airport update. I may do this airport update in the future. We'll have to see. Raleigh Durham is an interesting airport. It is an airport that serves the Raleigh Durham metro area, a very fast growing metro area in the U.S. state of North Carolina. Yeah, the Raleigh Durham Airport has an IACO code of KRDU, and it's the main airport in Wake County. Yeah, and Raleigh Durham is the second largest airport in the state of North Carolina behind Charlotte Douglas International Airport. It is the operating base for Avelo Airlines and a focus city for Delta Airlines. So there will be a lot of Delta Airlines aircraft in this airport day. And yes, in today's airport day, will be split up in a few parts. We'll be starting off with Terminal 1, which I'll explain in a moment. And then we'll do Terminal 2. We'll do Terminal 2. And in Terminal 2, we'll do the C gates, the D gates, then the C gates. So, yeah, I'll be splitting that section up in two because I don't have the space to have Terminal 2 out all at once, just because it's such a huge terminal. Yeah, sorry about that little hiccup there. So, nonetheless, we'll be starting off with Terminal 1. So, here is Terminal 1 at my Raleigh Durham Model Airport. So, Terminal 1 is mainly the low-cost airline terminal. It serves Breeze Airlines, Avelo Airlines, Spirit Airlines, Southwest Airlines, and yeah, so it serves those airlines, and yeah. And Breeze Airways will be moving to Terminal 1 starting this month. Because when I'm recording this is still in March, so yes, I just want to get a little ahead of the game. And there's also a few new airlines that Raleigh Durham will be adding in the near future, which I've also included in this video, just to make this airport day a little bit more diverse. So, yes, yeah, so Terminal 1 is the smaller terminal at Raleigh Durham. It's the outside terminal. And we'll be using the Gemini Jets Airport terminal to represent that. I haven't used that in a little while, so yes, and these are known as the A gates as well. So Southwest is located over here. They have 4 gates. And then Spirit also has around 2 gates. Then Avila has their 1 gate. Then Breeze, I just put them down there. We don't know yet where they're going to be parking, so I just parked them over here. And yeah, so nonetheless, we'll be starting off our very first aircraft in today's airport date. So I'd like to welcome everybody to this airport date once again. So starting off our first aircraft. So starting off our first aircraft here, we Southwest Boeing 747-800. This aircraft is riding from Baltimore at Southwest Flight 463. And it'll be heading out to Fort Lauderdale as Southwest Flight 3711. Moving on to our next aircraft. Here we Southwest Boeing 747-MAX 8. We'll say this aircraft is riding in from Denver at Southwest Flight 4268. And it'll be heading out to Nashville or Southwest Flight 5437. So Southwest does have a pretty good network out of Raleigh. Not their largest network out of any airport in the United States, but it's a fairly decent one. So yes, and in case I haven't mentioned that this airport day is based off of Sunday, March 31st of 2024. Moving on to our next aircraft, we have Southwest Florida 1 Boeing 747-700. This aircraft was actually visited Raleigh recently, so I caught it on Flight Radar 24, so that's really great. And it's great to feature some special liveries in today's airport day that are realistic. So this Southwest Boeing 747-700 in the Florida 1 livery has arrived in from Orlando at Southwest Flight 477 and will be heading out to Tampa or Southwest Flight 1377. So some fitting destinations, as those are some Florida routes. Moving on to our next aircraft here, the beautiful Southwest Boeing 747-700 in the Heart livery with blended winglets. This aircraft has arrived in from Chicago Midway at Southwest Flight 1326 and will be continuing on to Austin under the same flight number, so one of those Southwest continuation flights. Moving on to our next airline at Raleigh Durham, which is Spirit Airlines. So Spirit Airlines does have a small presence over Raleigh. They only have 2 destinations. They have Fort Lauderdale and Miami, and that's literally it. So there you go. So they do have a small presence over at Raleigh Durham, and so their first aircraft, the Spirit Airbus A320neo, will be heading out to Fort Lauderdale at Spirit Flight 1367. And the lovely Spirit Airbus A321-300 will be heading out to Miami at Spirit Flight 941 as a Saturday flight. Well, this exact flight is a Saturday flight, but they do fly the Fort Lauderdale and Miami service every day. But on Saturdays, they do use the A321 on the Miami route. So that's pretty exciting there. Yeah, not much else to say about Spirit. And moving on to our next aircraft, here the Avelo Boeing 747-800, and this aircraft will be heading out to New Haven as Avelo Flight 676. So, like I said in the beginning of this video, Avelo Airlines does have a operating base out of Raleigh Durham. They do serve a wide variety of destinations. So they fly to Albany, which is coming up on May 10th of 2024, so that's exciting. They fly to Fort Myers, Manchester, New Haven, Connecticut, Rochester, New York, and West Palm Beach. So those are the routes out of Raleigh Durham for Avelo Airlines. So that's pretty exciting, and I'm grateful to have it in Avelo model to represent those routes. And alright, so moving on to our next aircraft, and we're moving on to our next airline, which is Breeze Airlines. So they do have a really good presence over at Raleigh. And yeah, so starting off our first aircraft, we have Breeze Airbus A220-300. And we'll say this aircraft will be heading out to Windsor Locks as Breeze Flight 541. So that's a really cool Breeze flight. And we have a Breeze Embraer J195. And this aircraft has arrived in from New Orleans as Breeze Flight 330, and it'll be continuing on to Long Island Islip. So before we move on to the D gates, let's get some taxiing aircraft. So this FedEx Boeing 767-300F will be heading out to Memphis as FedEx Flight 1249, and FedEx does serve a wide variety of destinations out of Raleigh. And moving on to our next aircraft, and I'm grateful to catch this aircraft on Flight Radar 24 as well, is the Southwest Boeing 747-MAX 8 in the Canyon Blue retro livery. So this aircraft is actually paying a visit to Raleigh today, so that's really exciting. Yes, that's really exciting. This Southwest Canyon Blue 747-MAX 8 has arrived in from Baltimore as Southwest Flight 2774. They'll be heading out to New Orleans as Southwest Flight 4670. And alright, so moving on over to Terminal 2 at Raleigh Durham Model Airport, we'll be starting off with the D gates sections. It's just in case you didn't know, Terminal 2 is split up into two sections. We have the D gates, and then over there will be the C gates, which will be in the next portion of this video. But we'll be starting off with the D gates. So in the D gates, this is mainly the Delta Airlines section of the airport, because this is where their focus city is based out of. So we have a few mainline gates over here, a few regional jets over here for Delta, and those are some interesting routes there. And then we have Frontier and Alaska in here as well, so they also occupy the D section of Terminal 2. And then a bunch of United aircraft, and they're at the end of the D gate section. So so this terminal is pretty cool, but not as cool as the next terminal, which has some international airlines. But nonetheless, let's get started off with our very first aircraft in this terminal. Alrighty, so starting off with the regional flights from Delta. So all of the regional flights are operated by CRJ900s, and they're operated by Endeavor Air under the Delta Connection brand. So nonetheless, let's get started off with the flight. So our first Delta CRJ900 will be heading out to Cincinnati as Delta Flight 5189. Our next Delta CRJ900 will be heading out to Washington, DCA as Delta Flight 5006. And our next Delta Connection CRJ900 will be heading out to Austin as Delta Flight 5262. Yes, this is a CRJ700, but I don't have another CRJ900, and I really want to represent these regional flights. And another Delta Connection flight that Delta operates over at Raleigh is to Nashville, so that's a really cool one. They operate during the afternoon hours, so that's it for the Delta Connection gates. And alright, so moving on to the next airline over at Raleigh, which is Frontier Airlines. So Frontier Airlines does operate a wide variety of destinations from Raleigh, and I only am mentioning one of them today, unfortunately. So yes, and Frontier operate a wide range of aircraft to Raleigh, from the A320neos to the A321neos. Unfortunately, I couldn't represent the A321neo flights today, but in future airport dates, I will be able to, as I do have some Frontier A321neos on order from Aero Classic. So that's going to be really exciting. It'll be great assets for my Jacksonville Fictional Airport date and these random model airport dates. So that's really going to be great. But Frontier Airlines, so they operate a wide range of destinations. Most of them are permanent, but they do have some seasonal ones. They operate to Atlanta, Boston, Chicago, O'Hare, Denver, Miami, New York LaGuardia, Orlando, Philly, San Juan, and Tampa as the permanent destinations. And they also operate some seasonal destinations like Buffalo, Chicago Midway, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Dallas, Detroit, Hartford, Fort Lauderdale, Indianapolis, Long Island, New Orleans, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, and Portland, and Syracuse. So those are some Frontier routes out of Raleigh. But this Frontier A320neo today, A320neo will be heading out to Orlando as Frontier Flight 1039. And alright, so moving on to the United Airlines section. So they operate a pretty sizable operation over at Raleigh. Pretty sizable, but a pretty typical operation as well for their United States airports. So so they operate all to the normal United Airlines hubs. So anyways, let's get started off with our first aircraft. So starting off our first aircraft here for United Embraer J175, and this is operated by Mesa Airlines, and he'll be heading out to Yeah, he'll be heading out to Washington Dulles. Our next aircraft up is the United Boeing 747 MAX 9. This lovely NG Miles release. And we'll say this aircraft will be heading out to Newark as United Flight 1525. Moving on to our next flight. Sorry about that. Moving on to our next flight here, the United Boeing 747 MAX 8. We'll say this aircraft will be heading over to Washington Dulles. Moving on to our next aircraft here, the United Airbus A319-100, and this aircraft will be heading out to San Francisco as United Flight 1702. And moving on to our final aircraft in the United section here, the United Boeing 747-800, and we'll say this aircraft will be heading out to Houston as United Flight 740. And alright, so moving on to the stretch of Delta mainland aircraft along with the 747-900 from Alaska. So starting off our first aircraft, starting off our first aircraft, we have the lovely Delta Airlines Boeing 717-200, and this aircraft will be heading out to Detroit as Delta Flight 2689. Moving on over to our next aircraft, we have the Alaska Boeing 747-900ER, and this aircraft will be heading out to Seattle Tacoma as Alaska Flight 491. And moving on to our next aircraft, we have the Delta Boeing 747-800. We'll say this aircraft will be heading out to Seattle as well as Delta Flight 885. So, yes, I know that's another Seattle flight, but I really want to include all of Delta's mainland aircraft that fly out of Raleigh. So there you go. Just want to diversify the aircraft with just a little bit. Moving on over to our next aircraft here, the Delta Airbus A320-200. So yes, Delta does send the A320 over to Raleigh, and it does operate some really unique routes, I should say. So this Delta A320 will be operating arguably the most unique route out of the bunch, and this aircraft will be heading out to Tampa as Delta Flight 1160. So they also operate the A320 to Miami and to Orlando as well. All right, pushing back down here, the Delta Boeing 757-200 in the Marina Rivera titles there. This is a Gen 1 configuration operating for a Gen 2 configured 757 out to Atlanta, Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport as Delta Flight 1432. So Delta does send the 757s on the Atlanta service along with some 747-900s that are in the former Lion Air configuration. So there you go. And Delta has sent the 767 in the past, but unfortunately they are not using the 767 today's airport update, so we'll just be using the mighty 757 instead. Moving on to our next aircraft is the Delta Airbus A220-300. Haven't used this model in a while. And this aircraft will be heading out to Boston as Delta Flight 2999. So a lot of nines in that flight. And yeah, so once again, this aircraft will be heading out to Boston. And the final Delta aircraft in today's airport day is a Delta 747-900ER. And this aircraft will be heading out to Los Angeles as Delta Flight 957. And Delta also uses the 747-900 on the Las Vegas flight as well, and on the Atlanta flight, like I said earlier in this video. And alright, so moving on over to the sea gates at Terminal 2 at my Raleigh Durham Model Airport. So this terminal hosts the American Airlines section of Raleigh, so they have the mainland aircraft and some regional gates over here. So American Airlines does have a pretty good presence of our Raleigh Durham to compete with Delta. So they have your typical mainland services, then some regional services to a wide variety of destinations. So that's really exciting. So yeah, they got some unique ones in there. And then the sea gates also host JetBlue Airlines, so they also reside over here with American. And then we have the international gates over here. So there's some exciting international models in today's airport dates. So they mainly have these 4 gates over here. So yeah, Raleigh does have a lot of international airlines and got several new ones which we'll go over in today's airport dates. So nonetheless, let's get started with the JetBlue section. So starting with our first model in this section, which is the JetBlue Airbus A220-300. So yeah, it's great to see JetBlue serving Raleigh with some A220s. So this JetBlue A220 will be heading out to Orlando as JetBlue Flight 1891. So JetBlue does a fairly decent presence over at Raleigh. Moving on to our next aircraft, we have the American 747-800 with the winglet logos. This aircraft will be heading out to Phoenix as American Flight 3006. Moving on to our next aircraft, we have the American Airbus A319-100. And this aircraft will be heading out to New York LaGuardia as American Flight 2262. And we have the American Airbus A321. So Raleigh does see a lot of American A321s. That's what American mainly sends to Raleigh. Unfortunately, I don't have too many American A321s in my collection, so we're just going to be using just this one in today's airport update. So this American Airbus A321 we'll say he'll be heading out to Dallas Fort Worth as American Flight 2605. And we'll be starting off with the international section with our first aircraft being the Icelandair Boeing 747-MAX 8. So, yes, Icelandair does serve Raleigh with their 747-MAX 8. So it's great to see this international airline and have a unique international airline in the Random Airport update series. So, yeah, so this Icelandair 747-MAX 8 will be heading out to Reykjavik, Keflavik as Icelandair Flight 820. And alright, so moving on to the star of the show, being this American Boeing 777-200ER, and we'll say this aircraft will be heading out to London Heathrow as American Flight AA-174. Moving on to the next aircraft, you have the Air Canada Express Embraer ERJ-175, and we'll say this aircraft will be heading out to Toronto Pearson. And moving on to our final international aircraft at the gates, at least, here the Copa Airlines Boeing 747-800, and he'll be heading out to Panama City. So, Copa Airlines will be starting service to Raleigh this summer, I believe, on June 21st. So that's really exciting, and they'll be using these 747-800s, I assume. So, yes, it's great to see a new international airline over at Raleigh Durham, and once again, this aircraft will be heading over to Panama City. And alright, so moving on to some American Eagle aircraft. So this American Eagle, we're ERJ-175 in the standard colors, operated by Republic Airways, will be heading out to Pittsburgh today as American Flight 4650. And this American Eagle Embraer ERJ-170 in the retro livery will be heading out to Chicago O'Hare as American Flight 3709. And yes, I know this livery did not fly into Raleigh on the day I'm recording this, but I really want to include this American Eagle Embraer ERJ-170 flight in today's video, and I don't have a standard livery one, so this model will have to suffice. Alright, so moving on to our next American Eagle flight here with the American Eagle Bombardier CRJ-700. And this flight is operated by PSA Airlines, and he'll be heading out to Washington, D.C. as American Flight 5589. And this American Bombardier CRJ-900 will be heading out to Philadelphia as American Flight 5230. This is also a PSA Airways flight. Airlines flight. And alright, so moving on to some taxiing aircraft. So here with the blank Boeing 747-MAX 7. So, yes, this is another international airline that I'll be representing here. I don't have this international airline in my collection because nobody has released a model of the aircraft I'm about to say. So we'll just be using this blank 747-MAX 7 to represent this flight. And this is the Bahamas Air Boeing 747-700. So Bahamas Air has recently started service to Raleigh. So I really want to represent that today's airport day. Maybe one day NG will release a Bahamas Air 747-700. I'd definitely buy one. It's one of my most highly requested models. Anyway, so this Bahamas Air 747-700 will be heading out to Freeport in the Bahamas as Bahamas Air Flight 146. And moving on to our next taxiing aircraft, you have the JetBlue Airbus A320-200. This aircraft will be heading over to Fort Lauderdale as JetBlue Flight 2625. And our final aircraft in today's airport day is this Lufthansa Airbus A330-300, and he'll be heading out to Frankfurt, Germany today. So Lufthansa will be beginning service over to Raleigh this summer, so that's really exciting to see. And we'll be using this Airbus A330. So once again, this aircraft will be heading on over to Frankfurt. And alrighty, folks, so this concludes today's video. So this was the 6th Random Airport Day, and this is for April of 2024, representing the Raleigh Durham Model Airport. So yes, it's great to have Random Airport dates back on the YouTube channel using this mat over here. So that's really great to see. And yes, I really love doing random airports across the United States. So if you have any suggestions for any, use my subscriber route form link in the description below. And just, yeah, I do have a few options on there for you guys to pick for, or you can request your own Random Airport date. So I will do about any Random Airport request besides the major U.S. airports that I don't have enough miles for, like New York, JFK, Miami, Los Angeles, those kind of airports. But most Random Airport dates I can do that are based in the United States. So yes, maybe one day we'll do an international Random Airport date. So yes, so it's really great to do a Raleigh Durham Airport date just to get back on the Random Airport update series. So it's been a highly requested one. So yes, I do live somewhat close to Raleigh Durham. I live about 4 hours away from this airport, so it's nice to do an airport that's somewhat close to home for the Random Airport Date series. So yes, other than that, hopefully you guys really enjoyed this video. Sorry about the hiccups if I had any throughout this video. So yes, and Raleigh Durham is a booming airport. It's just a booming airport. That's all I gotta say. We've seen lots of new route announcements. I've seen so many. Yeah, that's another reason to do this model report. Just to this include all the recent developments over at Raleigh. So, yes, I'm sure this airport will become a major U.S. airport over the next decade. I'm sure Delta will expand their presence over here. Maybe American will decide to make this city a hub or a focus city. So, yes, I wouldn't doubt it because American Airlines does have their international service and their regional flights to a wide variety of destinations. So, and one airline that I didn't mention today's video, which was Aero Mexico Connect, and they'll be starting service to Raleigh to Mexico City, they'll be starting service this summer as well. I don't have an Aero Mexico Connect Embraer J190 to represent that, so we just did not include that in today's airport day, and plus I don't really have any more room for it. So nonetheless, I'm JT Pod. I'd like to thank you all so much for watching this video, and have a wonderful day and have a wonderful weekend.